certification of mill levy for El Paso County Pioneer Village Roads PID District for 2017 taxes payable in 2018. Mrs. Johnson.
Okay. Any discussion on this item? I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Call the roll. Commissioner Littleton.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerth.
Aye.
Commissioner Waller.
Aye.
President votes aye. That passes unanimously. Okay, we will adjourn that meeting and reconvene our general meeting. And if you're following us in the audience and at home, we still need some additional time for our budget items, so we will skip ahead. And I believe we can take up item 13.
Resolution prohibiting unauthorized camping on public property. Jim Reed, Executive Director, Department of Public Works, and Stephen Klafke, Assistant County Attorney.
Good morning, Commissioner. Stephen Klafke, Assistant County Attorney. What's in front of you today is really an amendment to a previous resolution, which is 10-130, which prohibited camping in general within the county. What we had come across with concerns raised to the Sheriff's Office, our code enforcement staff, and our Department of Transportation was issues concerning people essentially camping in vehicles within the county right-of-way. So what this resolution would do is provide some additional enforcement options for our county sheriff. And we worked very closely with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, with our Parks Department, and with our Department of Transportation to make sure that this fit all of their needs. And one clarification is this is really meant to address county property that's not parks property, so the parks rules still apply within county parks. Camping overnight is still prohibited in county parks unless you have a permit through that department. So that's the only clarification I wanted to make. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know Mr. Reed and our Sheriff's Office is also here.
Can you touch on the compatibility of ours ordinance here with the city?
You know, Commissioner, I'm not exactly sure what the city is doing in terms of their no camping. I know they've posted signs before. We've looked at signage requirements, and essentially given how much road that our county has, it's sort of impractical to make it a signage requirement before an enforcement option, if that makes sense. So what we've tried to do is give the Sheriff's Office as much discretion as possible when they go out there. We have worked with them on having a notice that they would post on the vehicle, and obviously they would go in and try to make contact with, if someone was residing within an RV or a car or something like that, give them some resources, make sure that they were aware of the prohibition. And I believe there's a 48-hour time requirement within there. We've also built in some discretion as well based on the totality of the circumstances. The Sheriff's Office is able to continue to enforce if, for instance, someone was noticed and in 48 hours they move, a block down the road or something like that. So we've built in some discretion for the Sheriff's Office with that regard too.
Okay. Commissioner Vanderwerth.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I support this. I have received several phone calls from residents on the west side who were dealing with individuals that were using camper-style vehicles, parking on curbs in county jurisdiction, and it seemed to be very, very difficult for the Sheriff's Office to appropriately deal with that, and this was most definitely a source of frustration for the citizens. So I do appreciate the Sheriff's Office working with our staff, and I appreciate our staff coming up with this resolution, which, if it doesn't exactly mirror what the city does with their requirements or with their resolution or their ordinance, I know that at least it gets close to mirroring it, and I think it is a needed thing for us. So appreciate the staff doing it, and I will support it.
Commissioner Littleton.
Thank you. Just a couple of items to point out where it talks about, some of the prohibited acts, some of the definitions of what we're talking about for camp or camping. But it doesn't talk about, it says it's illegal to do so. What are the consequences of doing it? And what prohibits somebody from, how do we track people who have their camper or motorhome or tent one place, They have it there for less than 48 hours, which is required no longer than 48 hours, less than 48 hours, and they move to a different place within the county, and they just keep moving places to places. How do we track or know if this is a persistent problem with a particular person? That would be my first question. And the second thing is, I would like for us to make sure that we are going to be in compliance and have the similar, if not the same, as what the city has as well. I would also like to just see food for thought for the future, and it doesn't have to be in this resolution today, possibly where people could get a permit, if you want to put it that way, to, for up to 7 days. For instance, I know a lot of people who have relatives who live in motorhomes, who travel around the country, who maybe between Christmas and New Year's want to have their parents or in-laws or relatives in a motorhome outside of their place, but they don't necessarily have a driveway that will accommodate a 35-foot motorhome. If we could accommodate something like that to have those type of permits, I think that would be showing that we're really listening to and considering constituents as well.
Good morning, Commissioners. Commander Kramer with the Sheriff's Office. And Madam Commissioner, I can answer some of those questions for you. In terms of that issue where you might have a particular person who erects a camp or erects a tent somewhere and then moves under that 48-hour window and then moves somewhere else, obviously that is a difficult situation. And up until this point, I don't think we have that going on too terribly much. However, as you can imagine, they would in fact fly below the radar in terms of the violation of the statute, right, or the resolution here, because it is in fact not a violation to camp somewhere under this resolution for a period under that 48-hour window and then move to a significantly different location, not just a block up the road, so to speak, and erect that somewhere else. And so for us, in terms of any specific tracking mechanism, other than just the officers on the street with just their kind of street knowledge of knowing the neighborhoods in which they patrol and being very familiar with their clientele, if you will, there is no specific mechanism for that. Obviously, as you know, most of the time when our patrol deputies contact someone for any number of reasons, they're running those names, and that's captured in our CAD screens through dispatch, et cetera. So we could run back historically and see if we've contacted that individual, but there are no specific databases set aside to say, hey, have we contacted this person for this particular reason at this location? But again, I think really probably the most effective way is really through the officers just having their own database in their head as far as their street savvy and knowing who they contact over and over and who's committing the violations as repeat offenders, if you will. Right. Obviously, if we've actually cited someone, charged them for an offense, then it becomes even simpler because now there's a paper trail. If we've done warnings, if you will, then the paper trail is slightly less because there's nothing significant in the system other than that call screen. As far as speaking to some of the similarities or lack thereof, as far as the Sheriff's Office approach versus the City of Colorado Springs approach to some of these issues, we are coming closer and closer to being very much mirrored in their approach. And so, for instance, although some city ordinances within the City of Colorado Springs might be a little bit different or a little bit more broad in scope, if you will, to address some of these issues, at least our approach when it comes to the boots on the ground approach to these individuals that are in violation of these things is very, very similar because we work in partnership oftentimes with the officers from the Colorado Springs Police Department to address some of these issues. As you know, the jurisdictional boundaries are like a jigsaw puzzle in some areas where you step 2 feet to your left and you're on county jurisdiction, and over here at city jurisdiction. The west side, the West Colorado Avenue corridor is a great example of that. And so in terms of the posting, the 48 hours to vacate notice, those are very similar in their verbiage and the approach that we take, and then our return to enforce that for those who have not vacated within those 48 hours, and the potential enforcement action that we take, and then also the referral services that we provide, right, because the available services for the folks who perhaps do not have a permanent type residence, those are services that are provided as a region, as a community. They're not unique to the county or the city. And so we do have very much a similar approach between city officers and county deputies.
Excellent.
Okay.
Sure, a couple things that you need to take in mind with this. We do have a permit called encroachment permit, which can be adapted to this very easily, I think. To Commander Kramer's comments, if someone is visiting their family, our guys probably wouldn't notice it. What we do notice is the trash that's out on the street, the cars that are tore apart, it's the oil that's in the street, it's the gray water, and Lord knows what else that's in the street. So those type of things, our inspectors catch that, and of course, we send our environmental person out there to check it and make sure it's not an environmental hazard. So those things would draw attention to someone doing this, but I think someone visiting their family, I don't know that they would actually catch something like that. We also have very active HOAs,
Right.
to the delight of some and the chagrin of others, and so they're, a lot of those require permits as well.
Right.
So, but we do have something that we can adapt to it fairly easily.
Okay, great, thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions up here before I open it up to the audience? Okay, is there anybody in the audience that would like to comment on this particular item? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back up here for final discussion and a motion.
I'd like to move for approval of agenda item number 13, resolution prohibiting unauthorized camping on public property.
Second.
I will call the roll. Commissioner Littleton.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Commissioner Waller.
Aye.
And the president votes aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hold on, I'm just checking on the status of our budget update. Okay, well, we're going to keep pressing until I get the okay to resume budget discussion. So item 14,
Planned Unit Development Preliminary Plan Amendment, Silverado Ranch, a quasi-judicial matter before the Board of County Commissioners. A request by Silverado Ranch, Inc. for approval of a map amendment